Namaste and good morning, everyone. Let's start our Thursday class with some prayers first. Om Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parbrahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Om Bhu Bhavaswaha Tat Savitra Varenayam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Diyo Yo Naha Prachodayam Asto Ma Sadgamya Tamso Ma Jyotirgamya Mrityurma Amritam Gamya Om Sehna Bhavatu Sehna Bhunaktu Saviryam Karvavahi Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahi Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So these days in this class we are studying ShvetashvatarUpanishad. And we ended our last week's class with verse number 4. And there was quite a bit of knowledge we found in that, just one verse alone. And how did they get that knowledge? Through meditation. Okay, so because with the help of this technique to control our mind, calm our mind, we connect it with God, and ultimately, who's the giver of the knowledge? The abode of knowledge, God. So they gave us with a little example. And now we'll see in verse number 5, where we are going to start the class today. So they say that this is another way we could understand what this universe is all about. So in the previous verse, it was an example of a chakra. Over here, it's the example of a great river. So let's look at verse 5. Panch saroto ambhum, panch yonye ugra vakram, panch prano urmim, panch buddhi adi mulam, panch avartam, panch dukho. Dukh avvegham, panch dash dvedam, panch parvam adhima. See this last word adhima. This is also goes with the previous verse. Adhima, that means we meditated. So from the meditation, this is what we got. So panch sarot ambhum, containing waters of the 5 streams or the 5 rivers. Panch yonye ugar vakram, which has 5 powerful turnings due to 5 causes. Panch prana urmim, that has the 5 prans as the waves. Panch buddhi adi mulam, which has the mind, the basis of the 5-fold perception of the source. See, mool means the source, the root. Panch avartam, which has 5 whirlpools. Panch dukh ugvegam, having the 5-fold misery as the rapids. Panch dash vedam, having 50 aspects. Panch shad, shad means it's like a panch is 5, shad 10, so 50 altogether. Panch varmam, which has 5 branches, and adhima, we think of, we meditate upon. We think of him. Him means God. We think of him as a river that contains the waters of 5 streams. That has 5 major turnings due to 5 causes. That has the 5 prans as the waves. The mind, the basis of the 5-fold perception, as the source. And has 5 whirlpools the fivefold misery as the rapids, 50 aspects, and 5 branches. Let's look at each term individually. So first of all, it's a great river. We know that source of all rivers can be traced back to the oceanic waters. And what happens afterwards? They merge back into the ocean. The same way the world emerges from and merges back into Brahma, the absolute truth. Because that is the very substratum for this whole existence. See, just like if you want to enjoy a swim in a river, we should be aware of its depth and the flow of the current. Otherwise, there will be a danger of drowning. And the rivers have very tricky whirlpools, dangerous creatures in it. That's why we are advised never to jump into the unknown waters. The same thing about this life also. This world becomes full of calamity for unthinking people who get caught up in it and suffer. That's why the wise, the yogis, they say you can, if you are cautious enough, you can achieve great happiness from the same world. It's like you can drown into the river or you can swim in the river. You can drown in this worldly existence, feel miserable, or if you learn how to swim in it, in this Maya, stay above Maya, you can enjoy this world also. So these students, when they meditated and saw the truth as a river, it appears to the ignorant as the river of worldly existence, but it was seen by the wise as the river of truth. So Panch Srot Ambum, what does it mean? 5 sense organs of perception. Ears, skin, eyes, tongue, and nose. Together they become 5 streams. So they come together to form the big river inside us. All that information through the sense organs come inside us. It's like a river water. So Panch Srot Ambum. Next one, he says, Panch Yoni Ugra Vakram. The world is made up of 5 subtle and gross elements. Panch Yoni. They gather force, become turbulent. Ugra means turbulent. And they take us through many twists and turns of life, which is called Vakra. And as human beings, we can quite easily get swept away by the force of our senses in the world of pleasure and indulgence. That's what he's talking about. Panch Yoni Ugra Vakram. Panch Pran Urmim. Pran, we are all familiar with the 5 physiological functions inside us. Pran, Apan, Vyan, Udan, and Saman. These are the Panch Pran, are the waves formed in this worldly river. Panch Buddhi Adi Mulam. What is the source of the 5 senses, which are the streams that form this river? Indeed, it is the mind without the backing of which senses cannot function. If the mind is distracted, even if the eyes are open and the ears are open also, we cannot see anything, we really cannot hear anything. That's why they say that a preoccupied mind does not hear even when spoken to loudly and clearly. Okay, there should be a connection. Panch avartam. As the streams of the senses flow down the stream, they get engaged with the whirlpools of the 5 sense objects. Sounds, touch, colors, forms, taste and smell. These are the objects. They are so tempting that we very easily drown in them. Panch avartam. Panch dukhog vegam. The river has many rapids where the swift current can easily sweep us off. And 5 rapids of life are the sorrows associated with the 5 stages of life. First stage of life is asti. This is the sorrow faced by the fetus living in the cramped conditions of the womb. Asti. Then janam, the birth of a baby, is painful, sure painful for the mother, but equally painful for the child also. Vardhate, the pangs of growing trials and travails. Vardhate, the growing pains, which we say commonly. Apakshiyate, that is the trouble of old age. Debility, senility, disease, those are all old age pains. And finally, the 5th one, vinashyate. We face the sorrow of death. So, asti, janam, vardhate, akshiyate, and vinashyate. These are the pancha dukkha vegan. The next one, he says, pancha shad bhedam. The 50 factors, they can be understood as the same spoken of in the previous mantra. But according to the yogic scriptures, they are describing the 5 or the 6 chakras. And in those 6 chakras, there are petals. And altogether, those petals in the Shat chakra are 50. Because each chakra is described as a lotus with a certain number of petals. We are familiar with these terms. Mooladhara chakra has 4. Swadhisthana chakra, 6. Manipur chakra, 10. Anahat chakra, the heart center, 12. Vishuddha chakra, 16. And Agya chakra, 2. Let me repeat it again. Mooladhara, 4. Mooladhara is the base chakra. Swadhisthana, the pelvic center, 6. Manipur chakra at the navel center, 10. Anahat chakra, the heart center, 12. Vishuddha chakra, the throat center, the abode of us, the Atma, 16. And the Agya chakra, the place for the Ishwar in our body, has 2. If you add them all up, this is 50. So pancha shad bhedam. So together 50 petals which represent various types of thoughts prevails in the individual. They are talking about here. Pancha shad bhedam. Next one, he says panch parvam. Some rivers are seen to branch out, and the river of life has 5 such branches. Without these branches, there won't be a life. And what are these branches? Avidya, asmita, rag, dvesh, abhinivesh. Avidya is the ignorance about who we are. Asmita, the ego, I amness. Rag, attachment, dvesh, aversion, and abhinivesh, fear of death. So these are the branches of the river. Panchaparvam. Fascinating indeed is this river in which we find ourselves. This is the river of our life. And that's what they saw in meditation, all of it. Now in the next verse, we'll see how we get caught up in this wheel of worldly existence and how can we get out of it. Because the goal is to get out of, but first we have to know what is it where we have been caught. So this is where we have been caught. The previous verse and this verse elaborates it fully. Let's look at verse number 6. Sarvajive sarvsansathe asmin brihnate brahmachakre hansaha brahmyate prithak atmanam preritaram cha matvaha jushtaha tatha tena amritvam eti. Sarvajive, that in which all beings live. Sarvasansathe, which is the place of dissolution of all beings. Asmin brihnate brahmachakre, in the great wheel of truth. Brihnate means great. So in the great wheel of truth, Hansaha, the individual being, Brahmyate, wonders. Prithak, separate. Atmanam, itself. Preritaram, the moving force. Cha means and, matvaha, considering. Jushtaha, blessed. Tataha, then. Ten, by him. Amritvam, immortality. Eti, attains. The jiva, that means the individual being, considering itself separate and different from the Lord, who is the moving force, wanders in the wheel of truth, the Brahman, in which all beings live and rest. Blessed by him and knowing itself to be one with the Lord, the jiva attains immortality. Okay, so that's why I said that how we get caught up in it and how we can get out of it is explained in this verse. It's the power of Maya. The truth appears as this universe. So the individuals, you and me, are also none other than the truth. But we have forgotten that. That's why the ignorant of our essential nature, we revolve in this wheel of worldly existence. And that's what avidya is. Because of this ignorance, we just keep on coming back here again and again. Hansaha. The word Hansa has many meanings. The one who roams around is called Hansaha. The Vedas, they say, Hanti gachati iti Hansaha. Keeps on moving, Hansaha. The sun is perceived to move from the eastern to the western horizon. So it's also called Hansaha, the sun. The swan keeps moving its legs. It's called Hansa. One whose intellect can distinguish between the self and the non-self is called Hansa. The wandering monks are also called Paramhansa. One who has realized, I am that truth, I am is aham. Sa means truth means sir. Hansa. If you together look at it. Where Hamsa means the Jivatma. The finite individual as he keeps roaming in this world, identifying with the different bodies. Hamsa. Then another term over here is Brihanate. The word Brahm or Brihanate comes from Brihad. Brihad means the unconditional and unqualified big. And over here, Brihanate means infinite. So the wheel of Brahm is infinite. That's why all living beings and inert objects exist and merge back into the infinite. Because those students, they ask this question, where did we come from? Where are we going back? So we came from Brahm and we are going back to Brahm. Then why does the individual wander and suffer? In this verse, clearly, he gives us the answer. It is because we, the individuals, think we are separate, prithak. You remember the term prithak in the second line, first word? We think we are separate from God. And God, who is the motivating force of preritaram behind this entire universe. And this thought of being separate and different makes us feel finite, helpless, and at the mercy of the world. That's how the individual becomes the doer of the actions. I am doing it. Or even the enjoyer or the sufferer of the results. The path of devotion advocates that we serve and worship God. That's how Lord showers his grace. Ten Ishvaren Jiva Jushtaha. And the individual attains immortality. We cannot achieve this immortality by doing any karma. According to the path of knowledge, when the individual realizes his oneness with the infinite truth, he ceases to be helpless and wandering finite being and realizes his immortal nature. So with the path of devotion or path of knowledge, ultimately we got to understand that we are not separate from God. That's how the questions asked by the disciples in the first mantra have been answered. The infinite truth with its inscrutable divine power is the ultimate cause of this world. Okay. The infinite truth alone appears as this creation due to this power and also governs it. We emerge from the truth, are sustained by it, and go back into it. Just like a wave comes from the ocean, sustained by the ocean, merges back into the ocean. Till we realize our oneness with it, we roam about identifying with the body. It could be a physical body, a mental body, intellectual body, egoic body. We keep on living as finite individuals. But when we worship God, or when we realize our oneness with him, then we attain immortality. which is called liberation, mukti, moksha, freedom, whatever you want to name it. We merge back. We realize that we are not separate. In the next verse, we'll learn what is the cause of liberation. Udvitam etat tu param brahm, tasmin trayam supratishtha aksharam cha, atra antram brahm vida vidit vahalina brahmani tatpara yoni muktaha. Udvitam, proclaimed. Etat, this, tu means verily, param brahma, supreme truth. Tasmin, in it, Tarayam, the three, the triad. Supratishtha, exist. Aksharam, imperishable. Cha means and. Atra, here. Antaram, inner essence. Brahmavida, the knower of truth. Viditvaha, understanding. Linaha, merged. Brahmani, in Brahma. Tatpara, remaining absorbed in it. Yonihi muktaha, free from birth. That means liberated. This is proclaimed to be verily the supreme truth. In it, the triad exists. It is a firm support and is imperishable. The knowers of truth, understanding its inner essence and remaining absorbed in it, get merged in truth and become free from birth. So, udvitam etat tu param brahma. The sages, the seers, all speak about the supreme truth and its greatness. The Vedas declare the supremacy of truth. In Kathopanishad, we learned, Sarve Veda Yad Padam Amanti. So the supreme truth, they declare that. Asmin Trayam Supratrishtha Aksharamcha. The supreme truth is the imperishable substratum, Akshara, of the perishable world of names and forms. So that means the names and forms, they will perish, but the substratum will never perish. Akshara. And there are many triads. That means the interrelated groups of three seen in this world. At the individual level, you can say that Bhogta, Bhogye, and Bhog. There are three. Bhogta is experiencer. Bhog is the experienced object. And then experience is Bhog. So Bhogta, Bhogye, and Bhog. Then there's another triad you can see. Knower, known, and the knowledge. Parmata, Prameya, and Paramaha. This terminology is from Bhagavad Gita. Parmata, knower. Prameya, known. And Paramaha, knowledge. Then we are all familiar with waking, dream, and deep sleep state. Jagrat, Swapan, and Sushupti. Then there is a Vishwa, Tejas, and Pragya. Waker, dreamer, and deep sleeper. And you can have many others also, triads. Then at the totality level, so this was at the individual level, but at the totality level, there is a creator, sustainer, and a destroyer, Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh. We are all familiar with. There is a Virat, Hiranyagarbh, and Ishwar. Virat is the total gross. Hiranyagarbh is the total subtle. And Ishwar is the total causal body. Three qualities of Prakriti we are all familiar with, Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. So the truth pervades, supports and illumines all these threefold factors of this world. Ashnute iti aksharam. Then the first part of the second line, Atra antram brahma vido viditvaha. We are all familiar with if a goldsmith creates different shapes, sizes, designs of gold ornaments, he will buy the raw material. The gold is neither created nor destroyed when the shapes change. Gold alone is the essence of the jewelry pieces, whether they are for the nose or the ears or the neck or the arms. The same way, we need not search for the truth in the seventh heaven. It is available right here. Atra. Atra means right here. And now, within the gross is present the subtle essence. Okay, we don't have to go somewhere, find somewhere else. The truth is to be realized within antaram, as the very inner self of the seeker. It is so close, so near. We have to just look within. Then he says, Lina Brahmani Tatparam Yoni Muktaha. Those who consider the truth as the supreme goal alone. Tatpara. So that means if you constantly remember that that is my supreme goal, you will constantly meditate on it. Tatpara means with a focused mind, with a full alertness. That is our main job. The rest of it's just temporary. So the main job we have forgotten. The temporary jobs we pay so much attention. That's why we are suffering. So tatpara. He says anybody who does that, they finally merge in the truth and become liberated from the cycle of birth and death. Never having to be reborn in the wombs of different species. Choice is ours. Do we want to come back again? Or do we want to just finish this game of coming back and going back? Terms like merging and liberation can be understood through daily life examples. When we fall asleep and we begin to dream, we can say that the waker merged into the dreamer. Merged. When a person awakens from the nightmare, that person is relieved to be free from the painful state of the dream, because it was a nightmare. That's how, just imagine the relief of one who awakens to one's imperishable nature and realizes that the world is unreal and we will never born into another womb again. That's where this great Upanishad is taking us to. So this is proclaimed to be verily the supreme truth. In it, the triad exists. It is the firm support and is imperishable. The knowers of truth, understanding its inner essence, remaining absorbed in it. That is a key word over here. Remaining absorbed, tatpara. Get merged in truth and become free from birth. Okay. And what is the cause of bondage? What is the knowledge that liberates? Is explained in the next verse, verse number 8. Sanyuktam etat ksharam aksharam cha vyakt avyaktam bharte vishwam isha anisha cha atma badhyate bhoktri bhavat gyatva devam muchyate sarva pashay. Sanyuktam, combination. Etat, this, ksharam, kshar means perishable, aksharam, imperishable. We learned these terms in Bhagavad Gita also. Cha means and, vyakt avyaktam, the manifest and unmanifest. Manifest is something which can perceive with the senses, manifest. Bharte, nourishes. Vishwam, universe. Ishaha, the Lord. Anishaha, powerless. Cha means and, Atma, the individual being. Badhyate, bound. Bhogtri bhavat, due to the sense of being the enjoyer. Bhogtri bhav. Gyatva, having known. Devam, the Lord. Muchyate, freed. Sarvashai, from all bondages. The Lord nourishes this universe, which consists of a combination of the perishable and the imperishable, the manifest and the unmanifest. As long as the Jeev does not know the Lord, it is powerless and gets bound by the sense of being the enjoyer. But when it comes to know the Lord, it is freed from all bondages. Pretty clear verse, but still let's go a little bit into the detail. Ksharam and aksharam. God nourishes, sustains, and protects the whole world. The world is called Vishwa, as it moves in many ways. So this changing world is a combination of the perishable, kshar, and the relatively imperishable. We all know that body changes all the time. Old cells die and the new cells are continuously created in our body. But the individual, however, remains in this body for a long time. Both are sustained and nourished by God. So kshar as well as akshar is sustained and nourished by God, who is the absolute imperishable truth. Vyakt avyakt. The manifest world is made up of the gross and subtle objects or matter. It is experienced by the living beings through their gross and subtle bodies. Prakriti, the infinite potential power of the Lord, is avyakta, unmanifest. It is the cause of the world and contains the individual vasanas or causal body. So the universe is a combination of the manifest and the unmanifest, vyakt and avyakt. So the gross and the subtle merge into the causal state to re-emerge again. But the absolute unmanifest God is beyond both, and the nourisher of both, the gross and the subtle, and the individual and the total vasanas. So that's why we say that God is the substratum of it all. Nothing can exist without this absolute truth. Now let's look at bondage. The individual self, even though sustained and nourished by God, feels helpless and powerless, a niche. We even complain that God has forsaken us. If God was here, there wouldn't be the wars. People say that. Or even the earthquakes. We feel orphaned. On the other hand, we get bound by our compulsive desires to enjoy. And those desires, they pull us into actions and propel us into the vicious cycle of doing and enjoying. That's what the doership and the enjoyership is. The knowledge of pleasures enjoyed previously, the objects of pleasures, and the notion of enjoyship prompts us all to action. The false notion of doership and enjoyership keeps us bound, badhyate. That is a real bandhan. And we become helpless, a niche. It's almost like a person released the parrot he used to keep in the cage, thinking that this parrot, a beautiful bird, deserved its freedom. He wanted the parrot to fly wherever it wanted in nature of its own kind. But after a couple of days, the parrot came right back. He happily entered the cage. And that is our story. We are similarly bound by our own sense of enjoyership. Bhogtari bhavat. We are happy just with little minuscule happiness from the objects, where we can have the absolute bliss. Liberation. When a man realizes that I am neither the doer of action nor the enjoyer of results, he gets liberated from the finitude, compulsive desires, desire-prompted actions, and the joys and sorrows reaped from those actions. This realization of God within liberates us from all the shackles. And how does this happen? We first must understand that we are not orphans. It is the Lord that sustains and nourishes us. And once we understand this, we will start worshipping and loving the God. And when we are loving the God, God is nothing but purity. Our own mind gets purified. With a pure mind, only with the pure mind will experience the grace. Even the grace is there, but our mind is so preoccupied with the desires, with the temporariness of this life. We don't experience the grace, even though it is right there. It's almost like if I just coat myself with the plastic and go into the water, I will not feel the coolness of the water, even though it's there. So we have coated ourselves with the desires. When a person understands this, will approach a guru and learns, will reflect, will contemplate, and finally realize the Lord. Lord, which is illuminating the right inside us. It's right there. He realizes that it was the Lord alone who sustained him all along. Even when a person did not believe in the existence of God or ignored God, God is the one which was sustaining. So this is what happens. Let me read this back. The literal translation, the Lord nourishes this universe. This is verse number 8, which consists of a combination of the perishable and the imperishable, the manifest and the unmanifest. As long as the jiva does not know the Lord, it is powerless and gets bound by the sense of being the enjoyer. But when it comes to know the Lord, it is freed from all bondages. And how do we know the Lord? That's why going to the place or to the person who knows it, just like when we wanted to have certain degree, we had to go to a certain university. We had to enroll into that school. We had to study. Over here, we want to know God. So that's why it's needed. We need to make it a full-time endeavor. It is that important. Next week, we'll start the class with verse number 9. And we'll see that what is the difference and the oneness between the individual and God. It is explained beautifully. Let's stop it here. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaye Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti 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 Om.